Welcome to HR Are You Listening? This is your host, Marta Fernandez, and today we are in our fourth episode, which is so exciting. Today we have an amazing guest. She's very special. I recently met her. She's a beautiful human being, and I really want you guys to know her. Her name is Kaitlyn Rios. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. How's your day so far?
It's going well. It's a rainy Saturday, so we just been hanging in our PJs this morning.
That's the best way to go about it. So, Kaitlyn, so we could start this episode. Can you introduce yourself to our beautiful audience?
Sure thing. So my name is Kaitlyn Rios. I am a physical therapist by trade and a board-certified wound specialist. So I work in the healthcare field. I am now not serving at the bedside, rather serving the manufacturing industry. So that gives me the opportunity to serve a lot of patients across the country, which is really cool. But in my spare time, I have started a nonprofit organization, which we'll talk more about today, but it's called Face with Grace. And we are helping women navigate workplace toxicity, teaching healthy leadership practices, paying it forward to the next generation of young women who have yet to enter the workforce, and teaching them how to recognize the signs and symptoms of a toxic workplace and be healthy leaders stepping into their first roles.
Wow. First and foremost, and I said this before when we met, the work that you do, I think it's super impactful and amazing, not only because I'm a woman, but rather because it's a need that the society needs to be able to move forward and create those work environments better, right? At the end of the day, we want to have a healthy environment so everybody can succeed in life and progress. I said to you to come up with a story that you would like to share with the audience, something that it could be positive or negative that impacted you or shaped your way of being, right? Work experience related. So with no further ado, what's your story today? I'm excited.
Yeah. So I'll take you back to one of my workplaces where there was definitely some toxicity running through the organization. Some of the leadership was quite broken, better at managing than leading. And I had a personal experience that taught me a lot about myself and how I should navigate these situations. Hopefully, it can help some of your listeners today. But it also taught me to be a little slower to trust people. My story goes back to when I first found out that I was pregnant with my second child. I was about 7 weeks in and everything was going well. I was healthy. Like, doctor had cleared me and said, "Yep, you're pregnant. Everything's good." When I was so excited, I wanted to just tell everybody. And so I told my coworker. She was super excited for me. And then I told my boss, who was the president of our organization, and worked very closely with him. And I'd seen him take care of employees very well through very tumultuous times in their lives. And so I felt very confident in trusting him and thinking, okay, I've seen how he's been with other people through medical issues and things like that. I'm going to let him know what's going on and we'll just see what the game plan is. This is a really small company, so not your normal go tell HR process, okay? And so I let him know, and I was like, so how does that work? What does maternity leave look like here? I had never been pregnant at this organization before. I was one of very few females working in the organization at the time, and so it just was new, uncharted territory. And that was about 7 weeks. And then he had told me, "You're good. We got you." It was a pat on the back. Don't worry about a thing. And so as time went on, I started voicing like what my expectations and hopes were for that maternity leave. I'm like, my last job, I had 12 weeks. I was paid. It was good. Could we do something like that? He's like, "Yeah, sure. Don't worry about it." Again, it was the brush it off thing. And time goes on and I started asking, like, what's our plan? Can we get it in writing? Because I'm just starting to get a little nervous at this point. That went on for several weeks. And I kept getting this, "We'll discuss it with HR. We'll figure out what's going on. We'll let you know." And it was just this over and over again process of not getting a clear answer. At 7 months, I can't even remember if they approached me or if I approached them, but I did get connected with HR. And at that point, they told me, "You don't have a maternity leave with this organization. There is no paid leave. There is no leave. You can take all the PTO you want, but there is no paid time off."
Can I ask a question? Prior to this incident, you didn't have any relationship with HR. I don't do you know that your partner was there, but in reality, there was no
It was
presence?
right. It was a very hands-off HR situation. I believe it was throughout this pregnancy, they had beefed up their HR processes. It seemed like they had hired this new woman into the role to run the HR department. She was like a one-woman show. She was kind of ramping up her department as I was going through my pregnancy.
Oh, okay. So it was completely, even for the HR, trying to figure out.
Loose. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 100%. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, let me backpedal just a little bit. During this prep of my first 7 months of being pregnant, another employee also got pregnant. She happened to be an African-American woman, which I didn't think twice about that. That didn't make me think anything. But when it came down to the, oh, we've got you, that all changed when she got pregnant.
Wow.
Policy changed because, oh, we can't do for both of you the same. So now we're just not going to do anything. Wow. And it was.
But that was.
Go ahead.
Sorry. But that was not like, at that point in time when you were like, you didn't like, oh, this is happening because two people were, or is it immediately your head went to, oh, they're backtracking because we're two people?
I think they were backtracking because it was now two people. They had more to accommodate.
No, I see.
And they didn't want to show any favoritism, special treatment. I was in a leadership role. So she was stepping into a leadership role. So we're relatively on an equal playing field. And I just got the sense that had I gone through this alone at that time, they would have had me covered. But not theirs too.
Well, I see.
There were other like racial situations going on in this organization at the time that was very touchy. And it was like everyone was just terrified to do anything that played the race card. And it just felt so aligned with that. It was like, wow. So I sat down with HR at that time and walked into the boardroom. There's that like proverbial box of tissues sitting there waiting for me and her with a notebook. Like it was like something out of a movie. And I sat there and I cried. I did. I like let it all happen. And it was like, why can't we do well on both women's behalf versus pulling everything back and saying there is nothing, we can't do anything for either of you. And met with empty answers. You know what I mean? It was just, it was just a gross feeling. It was awful.
I feel sorry for you. Actually, I want to interject to your story. I recently had a conversation about this conversation, in particular pregnancy and maternity leave and how to handle it as a woman. And so you just bring me so much insight because I was just talking about this to someone. And the fact that you went to this office and just have certain expectations and they set it up for you to be like, hey, just for even without talking, the layout and everything, it makes you feel small. Does that make sense? Like if you enter to a place and they already create that environment, you could be vulnerable, but in our terms. I don't know if that makes sense. It feels very iffy, and I want to acknowledge that because I'm pretty sure it still happens in a lot of companies. What you could do, and it's your first kid, right?
It was my second, but still, you're still pregnant and have a million emotions, and it's all nuts. Yeah, you walk into that room, this giant boardroom table, and we're at the very end of it. And it just felt cold, and it felt like bad news the moment I walked into it, despite what we had already talked about or not. And the thing that I take away from this is not so much that I point a finger at this company being awful and how they handle their maternity leave. It was the false promises leading up to it. And the discussion of, oh, we've got you, we've got you, we've got you. Actually, never mind. No, we don't. Because now HR is deciding to step up and do things the right way. It was like something flipped a switch during my pregnancy. And I don't fault them for that. I don't fault them for being a good HR. I looked into all of the legal ramifications of that. Everything was sound. But it was how that was handled, how it was delivered to me at the final hour. I went on bed very soon after that process. I don't know if it was the stress that hit me or what, but I was struggling. And so had I known ahead of time, it may not have been as stressful because I could have planned financially. Just so many different things would have been handled differently. But it was a rocky road. It was not a fun pregnancy.
Wow. And I want to go back very quickly so you can finish your story. Your CEO said, okay, go talk to HR from now on. That's what he did? It sounds like you were having conversations with him and then suddenly he's, hey, here, go talk to HR. They will handle things. That was
having some sidebar conversations with them to run his plan, his loose, we got you plan by then. They weren't good with that. And then they asked the meeting to sit down and talk about it. And that's when they delivered the concrete facts that I should have known all along, right? Like, bad on me for not just going straight to them, but it was not the way this company operated. So I didn't operate that way either.
Wow. So what happened?
I went on maternity leave and didn't get paid at all. I took 6 weeks, came back at 6 weeks. Very soon after, I quit. I was actively looking for a job the entire time I was on maternity leave. I remember interviewing for my next role with, I think my daughter was 4 weeks old. She was in my arms during my interview. Like, I was so stressed out. To treat maternity leave like that felt like a disservice to my child. But it felt like also what I had to do. I didn't want to go back to that environment after that.
Wow. Do you think like
Yeah.
the culture back then in that company play a factor? Because their culture that was fostered was more like open doors, family, hey, come down here. Because how you said you went to the route of, oh, this is the culture. Like, I just can go talk to the boss. Everything will work out.
Wow.
I guess that's the part where you said about trust-ish, like the not trusting people quickly. Would that be a variable that affects how you perceive trust or building trust with people at work?
100%. I think that after that job, I pretty much don't believe in the whole we're a work family notion anymore. I just don't buy into that anymore. And maybe that's just a protective mechanism. I think that's a beautiful concept, but I think that it lives in concept and it doesn't ever actually play out for real. And yeah, it changed the way I trust people. It changed the processes I follow. Like, no matter what someone says now, I go to HR, right? Like, I don't even think twice about that anymore. And, I think that it's a lesson that I learned, but it's a lesson anyone can learn. I think that you have to recognize that there are very black and white processes for certain things for certain reasons. And I think the danger that we run into, and I think the way that it was before this HR leader stepped up and started really following standard protocols and procedures, is that sometimes the HR is they're so connected to the way the culture is and the way the leadership is run that maybe they don't always practice the way they're supposed to. And so then can we trust HR even? And I think that's really the way I felt about it. It was like, okay, the president of the company really runs the show here. Like, he's got HR under his wing. And so what he does goes. That's the way it's like it was. And good on HR for stepping up and being a real HR, because that's what they should have done all along. But that's not the way they made their employees feel. And totally skewed my judgment.
It's the delivery, right? Because it seems that you were very flexible or willing to understand the side of the company, especially because you were in the leadership position. So you really understand the business aspect of things. But I really want to hone on the idea of the communication of how things are delivered. It's not necessarily what you're saying to the employee rather than how you say it, and creating those false expectations. And I have seen it before. The CEO says, yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's to then actually go back and really talk to the person who is supposed to handle this. In this case, it went to the HR professional. The person did the best judgment in their capabilities at that point in time, which was, hey, this is not feasible for the company right now. Whatever it is that the decision was, but it breaks that relationship that you had once with your CEO. You once had that relationship with him or her, and then suddenly you set expectations that you were not able to meet, and now you're affecting my employee experience with the company in a way that you eventually left. So,
yeah. And I think it was the moment when I started asking for things in writing, which said, literally the words out of my mouth were, I trust what we've discussed, but I also know it's good to have things in writing. So can we? And at that point, it was like everything changed. And I started getting, arm's distance conversations and just, let's get with HR and figure things out. And it was just very hands off from that point. And that's when I think that it clicked for me that this wasn't going to shake out the way I thought it would. But just so that like your listeners don't think I'm just crazy and a blind truster of people, I watched this company take care of a man who went through stage 4 cancer and was out of work for years and months on different periods of time, received a paycheck the entire time. Like, why wouldn't I get the same when I'm having a baby and need a few weeks off? So to me, like, that juxtaposition of trust comes in when you see how they've treated people in the past and like, why can't it be the same now?
Yeah, this touched very personal because I had been in situations before at some point in time, a boss taking care of their employees super well. And once you start bringing HR, like a professional, to start institutionalizing the company, that sounds terrible, but that's actually the word, creating proper procedures, creating protocols and policies. And once the company going through that stage to make it more formal company and moving away from the family culture environment, it leads to a lot of bad experiences for employees, especially like you, where you saw someone who was well taken care of and suddenly your circumstances, it's a normal part of life. A woman having a birth, it's part of life. That's inevitable, right? And so you would have assumed like at least they will be able to compromise or find ways to go about it rather than immediately taking it out of the conversation like, hey, this is what we're not doing this.
Right.
And so I've seen how disruptive it could be for the company when institutionalizing or bringing someone with actual professional background comes in, because there is lack of communication. What you just said, like you were from yes to suddenly the door is shut and you don't even know when it happened. And you're right. I agree with you with the comment where you said family culture doesn't work in the long run. It sets false expectations for employees.
Right.
Now that you have the nonprofit, what type of culture you foster in your company? Because you do want to stay away from the family work environment. What's the culture within your nonprofit based on the past experience that you have had?
Yeah. So now I'm sort of an employee of one, but I do have 4 board members, and I treat them the way I would want to have been treated as an employee. I am open in my communication. I try to give them very transparent access to all the tools, resources, and information that I have. But I also set boundaries. I'm not going to be the type of leader that's like, I love you and you're an amazing person. I'm just going to like cozy up to someone. I'm not going to do that. To me, that is a very family thing. Like, I'm all about complimenting my team. I think that's super important. We need that, like those words of affirmation and showing that we appreciate people. But I think there's a fine line there that we have to dance along that keeps people at a professional arm's length, right? I've just been burned so many times in the past now that it's like, I don't want to ever put someone in that predicament that I was in.
Yeah.
There was so much trust and so much love and so much fill in the blank that made me feel this like family aura, where God forbid something happens in business that I can't control and it affects one or more of the people I work with. I want to be able to have that arm's length professional distance from people that allows me to still maintain a open communication that is transparent, but that is also business-like, you know what I mean? And keeps everyone safe in the process. It's not a personal thing, it's a business thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I fully agree. And I feel like your sentiment really goes back to what happened to you when you're on maternity. I'm not a mother, but I would just imagine the emotional stage that you were going through, even as your second kid. And that makes me feel like if I think about it in the HR perspective, I like if I was there at least, it's nothing that your HR did wrong or anything like that, but I would have been more human. There's like ways, and you just said it, like there are gonna be things that you cannot be able to deliver or
Right.
yeah, because it's business. A business can't there's certain things that a business cannot do, and I think people have a hard time to even comprehend that aspect. But I feel like when you talk about being kind and having open conversations and transparency, also it's about aligning your boundaries. If you have had that maybe with HR and maybe with your CEO would have less of a impact or negative impact because you remember it as a very bad moment to a point where you end up like taking time off because you were feeling bad. I think this is the part where I feel as people don't understand with HR. It's when HR is coming into a new company and is trying to work with the culture. It's not that we try to be bad, but it's
Right.
also hard to maneuver what the CEO wants, like what he's like coming up with or aligning with the ideas or the visions of the CEOs wants in the culture and putting into action is very hard when you're trying to also standardize things. A lot of times maternity leave are not paid. And I have never worked for a company that has paid maternity leave ever. They do oh yeah, we could give you FMLA, right? You could go and you could have your 12 months unpaid. And so I'm like, that's very discouraging for a woman.
Yeah.
Or is afraid, I would say as well. And that's a thing.
A lot of women, it's just not achievable. Like you maybe can't survive for 12 weeks without money. Maybe you don't have a partner who's got a hefty enough paycheck to carry both of you for that long, right? Some people just cannot. And I took 6 weeks versus 12 when I could. I mean, FMLA gives us that, but that wasn't sustainable. I didn't have the time to plan because I found out 2 months before I had my kid that that was going to be reality. So wild.
Yeah. And just to summarize your experience, the lack of trust comes down to when someone set an expectations to you and never be able to fulfill it. And maybe blindside you. Would that be the word, that they blindside you, like when they keep saying yes and they knew that was not going to be the case? How you handle that now? How you handle that trust relationship, like not only with your HR teams but with anybody? How you handle that?
I think I'm just more cautious in my relationships professionally and personally, mainly professionally. I think that I learned a phrase from my boss at the job I took after I left this position. She always would say, trust but verify. It's with me all the time. It's like, you can still trust people. There's nothing wrong with that. But check your facts, right? Do your homework. Go and talk with all the people you need to talk with and make sure that's actually accurate. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we shouldn't be ashamed to do that. We shouldn't feel bad for doing that. Because you can go to that person and say, I believe you, but I've had my fair share of experiences where I blindly trusted and it didn't work out in my favor. So I'm going to go do my homework real quick. I don't think anyone discourages that. And no one ever gets upset about that. That's just really the mantra that I've carried with me since then. And it works. Like, it's a very clean, easy phrase to remember that helps keep me aligned with what I need to do to take care of myself and to take care of other people.
Well, yeah. I'm very happy that I shared this story. It's so funny because it does definitely align with the communication, with trust and culture. The culture that the company provides, the trust that the company culture gives you as an employee, right? And the communication, even though you have trust and a good culture, if the communication is not clear and transparent, it ultimately affects your employee experience. It affects you so bad that it gets to a point where you're like, I cannot longer work here. So retrospectively thinking, what is one thing that you would tell yourself back then? Or what is one thing that you would say now to people as a tip or advice, like from your experience? What is you say, if I knew this or if I had this?
I think that for me, and I almost hate to say this because it makes me sound like I'm a hardened person, but I think that in business, we always have to keep a wall up, right? To a certain degree. For some, it could be like a half wall, right? Like, or just enough to protect ourselves and to see things clearly. Continuing that mantra of trust but verify. I work with wonderful people, but I have seen things falter, right? I've been in situations in this job and jobs previously where I worked with very trusted people, but the situations played out where had I not had that little wall up, it would have broken me. And so I think that through these experiences, working in toxic environments, working in environments where communication faltered or trust was broken, it's just taught me to just be a little bit more cautious in general. And I think had I known that, had I experienced those things beforehand, I would have approached that situation much differently. And I carry that with me through what I do today.
Wow. Yeah, it made you who you are, for sure. You're a great business person, but you're also very human. Like, you're very approachable. You have that aspect where you're like, there are limits, right? The last question I want to ask, because I think I forgot to ask you, what was your relationship prior your maternity leave with HR? I was thinking about this when you were talking. It kind of reminded me of you never necessarily talked to HR like in the past, but like you said, I would have had prepared myself better.
Mhm.
What was your relationship with it? Is it HR something that you even think about in those moments, or it
I
was
mean,
more like,
not really, honestly. I had worked, I guess, 4 other places prior to that, and I think about all my relationships with HR, and they were extremely hands off. It was
huh,
like, if you interact with HR, it's because something's gone wrong, or maybe, like, when you're onboarding, that's probably the only time I ever really interacted a lot with them, and I think that's a dynamic that really has to shift in our world. I think that
huh,
HR should be sort of a confidant and a voice to the people, and they should be the ones locking arms with them all the time. Probably the best relationship I had with HR was in the job after the one I just described, where I had an HR business partner who I would meet with once a month, and we were very close, and we worked very collaboratively and very well together, and we supported each other, and it was great. And I think that's really how it should be. In the younger parts of my career, I didn't know any better. I didn't know we were supposed to keep this relationship up with HR. It was very hands off.
yeah. Yeah, I was aligning my thoughts with that aspect because I find it interesting that in your second one, you had struggles, right, with the HR, with the company. And I'm always like, is it just because the company was a special company, to say the least? Or it was the idea that you just didn't have that relationship with HR where you collaborated? Does that make sense? Like, I'm thinking like how proactively HR could have help you
Mm,
alleviate that situation. Before we wrap this up, I just wanted to figure out that because something that I particularly look into as
mm.
an HR is to how to improve. If I was in a scenario like yours, like what could I have done? Or like just to understand that there are ways to maybe proactively assist.
I think it depends on the type of organization. So I think of the relationship I had with HR during my first pregnancy. It was also somewhat hands off, but it was because the organization I worked for was huge. They had a very systematic way of handling a maternity leave. It was, hey, you email HR and then they kick you over to all the benefits people that help you go through FMLA. And it was just very third party feeling. And so in that way, it was hands off, but not in a way that was like, we just don't have a great structure. It was just their process was, they had it figured out. It was like clockwork and cookie cutter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There just wasn't a lot of nuance there. Where the other organization with my second child was so small, so new, so fill in the blank that everything was so loose. And so I think if I could go back and have this like ideal HR situation, it would have looked like someone who had open communication with me. It would have looked like someone who showed me that human approach and that support and that almost like mentorship through that process where I'm navigating uncharted waters and what do I do? Where do I turn? How do I handle this? How do I
Yeah.
phase
I
out?
hear-
All of it felt very, very hands off, but for very different reasons. So I think being able to lock arms with employees is super important.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. It just gave me food for thought because I definitely think that sometimes a lot of people be like, I cannot do anything. And to stay away versus maybe you could do the, hey, let me guide you to the right resources or let me help find the right person. Just right there makes a huge difference for people. And I would imagine that will make a huge difference for people who are pregnant and need to figure out what their action steps are. Yeah. And so I'm going to wrap up this conversation just to summarize the ideas that came to my mind of the importance. It's the first and foremost, communications, but the communication is so important and having transparent and setting boundaries with that aspect comes to be able to say, I'll be nice and I'll be kind, but also remember there's a business aspect of, and there's going to be times where you have to limit yourself with the
Mhm.
relationship that you're building. And also, I feel like the aspect of sometimes HR might be in the kind of like there, but due to the circumstances and nature of the work environment and the business itself, it might not allow them to be as a service as they could be, like giving them grace in that aspect. I think people, and you said it well, I'm not blaming HR, I'm not blaming the company. It's just things. And I think the last thing I want to mention was the culture aspect that you said. I think people need to understand that if you work in a company that has that business, family-oriented culture environment, at the end of the day, that might change sooner rather than later. And people need to be ready for that change. If not, you're going to go and have a bad experience, which
Right.
will set that expectation in your back of your head. Like, family business cultures always evolve. And if you're
Yeah.
not ready for that change, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's going to come. Businesses are going to grow. Yeah.
And you'll
All right.
I mean, replaceable, unfortunately. No matter how much an organization preaches that family mentality or that family culture, at the end of the day, you're a number, you're a cog in a wheel, and when shit hits the fan, like, if they have to let you go or if you have to go, you're gonna be replaced, and they're gonna move on with their business because that's their business. They're not gonna think about the family so much anymore. Protect
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. That, I think that's a good way of seeing it. It's always like you need to protect yourself. Put yourself first.
Yeah.
Like, the company will do, if it's a good company, will try to do the best as it can to assist you, but they're not going to be able to solve your problems or everything that you have. Okay. Is there anything else that you like to share that you say, if you want to go with a takeaway, this is it?
Sure. You are your own best advocate. I tell my kids that every single day. Literally, you are gonna have to fight your own battles, and you've got to find ways to protect yourself. So just be careful out there. Be slow to trust. And then, if I may, I'll put in a shameless plug for my organization. So if you're walking through a situation like that and needing guidance, needing support, needing to learn how to become a better leader because what you've seen is poor leadership, you can reach out to me directly at connect@facewithgrace.org. And you can visit us online at www.facewithgrace.org.
There you go, guys. You got it. That is an amazing ad right there. Actually, you could see her. She has gone through a lot. She is someone who is empowered, but also have learned how to take care and set boundaries. I think you should definitely take a look. I'll always link down her profile down below so you could follow her also in LinkedIn. She creates amazing content. Feel free to check her out. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you like this episode. I think was very valuable, especially for us women who tend to navigate sticky situations sometimes at work. And we sometimes feel uncomfortable to deal with those little situations like pregnancies, which is very important, by the way, to educate ourselves and how to navigate those situations and conversations with work and our employees and our employers. So with that, thank you so much, guys. And I will see you in the next episode. Oh, thank you, Kaylee, for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
Awesome. Bye.